Number 10. The Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, also known as the Codex Gigas, is one of the most bizarre books ever written. It was discovered in the year 1648, when the Swedish army swept through the city of Prague during the final days of the 30 Years' War. Among the treasures that they stole and took home with them was the Devil's Bible. It was the biggest medieval book on the planet, standing 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, and 8.7 inches thick. It contains 310 pages made from the skin of over 160 donkeys. It's also missing 10 pages, and nobody knows exactly what was written on them. And if all these measurements weren't enough to detail its huge size, the book actually weighs 165 pounds. That's about as much as an average person, if not more. But what does the Devil's Bible contain? Contrary to what the name might have you believe, the book has all of the Christian Bible inside its pages. But there is more than just the Bible. There are also details on medical practices and things like exorcism. The reason it's called the Devil's Bible is because there is a giant illustration of the devil himself. The illustration is so big that it takes up a full page. He was drawn alone, seemingly for no reason, and with no text to suggest why he was put into the book. One of the theories as to why the devil is in the book says that the unnamed scribe who wrote it sold his soul to the devil so that he could complete his life's work and write the book in a single night. Number 9. The Discovery of Witchcraft. The Discovery of Witchcraft was written in 1584 by an Englishman named Reginald Scott. It was meant to be an expose on witchcraft. The book contained information that was supposed to show the public how they were being fooled by the charlatans of the day. In other words, he was debunking witchcraft. In the book, Reginald went on to say that the prosecution of supposed witches was completely irrational, not very Christian, and was a tool being used by the Roman Church. He was basically the first whistleblower in history. He wrote the book as a way to enlighten the people to what was going on around them. He basically said witchcraft didn't exist, and that the people in power were using witches as a type of subjugation. Keep in mind that this was the year 1584, and so speaking out against the Roman Church wasn't the smartest thing to do. The book was immediately banned. King James I ordered all copies to be burned in 1603, and the book was almost lost forever. Number 8. Icelandic Sorcerers and Books of Black Magic. There was a book written back in the 1500s that some say was the blackest book of magic and dark knowledge from the age of the heathens. It came from Iceland, and it's called Raudskinna, which translates roughly to Red Skin, written by Bishop Gottskog the Cruel. The text inside the book was written with gold letters and gold runes on red parchment. The book itself was apparently so powerful and filled with such great knowledge that the bishop was buried with it so that nobody else would ever get their hands on the magic spells. In Icelandic folklore, it's said that he who understands the spells in the book can learn to control Satan. Unfortunately, nobody knows where the book is today. We know Bishop Gottskog was a very real person, appointed in 1496. He had a thirst for witchcraft and black magic. He had multiple lovers, and he was, all around, a pretty terrible person and not a very good bishop. He was also allegedly buried with his unholy book of black magic, though this has never been historically confirmed. Nobody knows if the book really is in his grave, if it's been stolen by grave robbers, or if it even still exists. Would you like to read this book? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 7. Uncle Tom's Cabin. The history of Uncle Tom's Cabin is arguably one of the most important lessons when it comes to censorship and how information can be restricted based on who's in power. The book was written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, a woman who lived most of her life as a slave before Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. She wanted to make her experience tangible and turn her life into a lesson that would last. And so she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. The book was based around her own experiences, using real people she had known in life. When it was published in 1852, it sold 10,000 copies in the first week and 300,000 copies in the first year. Harriet Stowe turned into the first American author who wrote an international best-selling work of fiction. Abraham Lincoln called her the little lady who made this big war. But here's where the forbidden comes into play. It was immediately banned in the American South as abolitionist propaganda. Keep in mind that the slave owners were still in power at the time, and they had control of what got published and what didn't. So, since the novel portrayed slavery in a poor light, they simply banned it so that Southerners couldn't read it. Number 6. The Satanic Verses. The Satanic Verses, as you can probably tell by the title, was one of the most controversial and forbidden books of all time. The book was actually released pretty recently, in the year 1988. It was written by a British Indian man named Salman Rushdie. Salman quickly became one of the most hated human beings in the world, specifically because of his satiric use of Islam in the Satanic Verses. In 1989, Iran's Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini issued what was basically a hit against this guy, encouraging extremists to go out and kill him and his editors and publishers. There were violent demonstrations in Pakistan. People burned the book in public in Britain and bookstores, or even bombed. Shortly after the book was published, it was banned in a handful of countries. But just why did this book end up being so forbidden? It was because of the way the author spoke about Muslims. He was accused of misusing his free speech, as he basically turned the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, into the devil in his book. Number 5. The Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon dates back to the 17th century, though the content within was actually produced several centuries before the book was created. It's a type of grimoire, anonymously written as a book about demonology and how to practice witchcraft. The book is filled with spells, incantations, and instructions on how to raise spirits and interact with demons. Seeing as this was published in the 17th century, it quickly turned into a forbidden book. After all, this was a time when witches were still being burned. The church couldn't exactly have a book on summoning demons floating around. To be exact, the book details how to conjure at least 72 different demons. It also mentions how to call upon angels. But it was the business with the demons that made the book such a dangerous tool. During the Renaissance, the book was described as containing wicked curiosities and unlawful charms. In modern times, Aleister Crowley translated the Lesser Key of Solomon and added details on the psychological condition that one needs to be in when summoning demons. Number 4. Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf is not only one of the most famous books ever written, but also one of the most controversial. Retailers in recent years have been struggling with this book, as it's basically a tome of hate speech written by Adolf Hitler himself. But at the same time, banning the book in the United States would be in direct violation of free speech. For those who don't know, Mein Kampf was a manifesto written by Adolf Hitler and published in 1925. As the most hated man in the world for almost 100 years, it's no surprise that most people would be happier with this book gone. Just recently, the New York Times reported that Amazon banned the sale of this book, along with all other books that promote Nazi ideals. However, just days later, Amazon reversed the decision and continued to allow the sale of the book on their website. But what they have done is prohibit secondhand copies from being sold by third-party merchants. What this means is that Amazon, and only Amazon, is able to sell the fascist manifesto written by the dead Nazi leader. But be warned, if you buy this book, well, chances are you're going to be put on some kind of government list. Number 3. Egyptian Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead is a mysterious, forbidden text from Egypt's New Kingdom, a sort of magical guide on how to navigate the Egyptian underworld. The Book of the Dead, of which not many copies are left in the world today, comprises roughly 200 spells that can be used to aid a recently deceased person as they journey through the world of the dead. Many of the spells within the Book of the Dead were taken from earlier, even more mysterious writings, like the coffin texts and the pyramid texts. The earliest copy ever found wasn't actually in the form of a book, not like a book you would find at the store today. Instead, the text was written on the sarcophagus of Queen Mentuhotep, who died in the 13th dynasty. It was the spells of the Book of the Dead that were forbidden during ancient Egypt. It's because these spells were considered sacred and were reserved for pharaohs and the most important members of Egyptian society. These were closely guarded secrets that only the most skilled priests had access to. Number 2. The Necronomicon. The Necronomicon, according to popular fiction, is a book written by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred. The book is more of a grimoire, a textbook of magical properties. It supposedly contains an account of the history of the Old Ones who lived before humans. It also details how a person could go about summoning one of these ancient deities. Luckily, the Necronomicon is a work of fiction. There are no Old Ones, Cthulhu isn't real, and H.P. Lovecraft made it all up. He first mentioned the Necronomicon in his short story The Hound, written in 1922. He continued to use the book throughout his fictional universe. It was later portrayed in the Evil Dead films as an unholy tome that could summon demons. But of course, there is no actual copy of any real Necronomicon, not anywhere in the world. Number 1. Lolita. Lolita is by far the most controversial novel ever written in the 20th century. It was Vladimir Nabokov who penned the book, detailing a very unsettling relationship between a grown man and his child lover. The storyline of the book is not only unconventional and disturbing, it is at times completely sickening. And yet, at the same time, it's one of the most celebrated novels ever written. Some have praised the book as a triumph of literature, while others hate it and every last word written inside its pages. It's not hard to see where all the hate comes from. The book revolves around a man with a fetish for young girls. He actually marries a woman for the sole purpose of being closer to her daughter, named Lolita. Yet, even though the book is forbidden, initially banned in France, England, Argentina, and New Zealand, it eventually became an international bestseller. There was even a movie made about the book. Today, the book isn't actually banned in these countries anymore, but it's still a hugely controversial piece of fiction. Which of these forbidden books would you like to read yourself? Let us know in the comments.
Number 10. Reptilian Overlords. The Ubaid figurines, relics from the earliest remnants of human civilization, may just be the evidence of our ancient reptilian overlords. These strange artifacts were found at the archaeological site of Al-Ubaid in modern Iraq, what was once ancient Mesopotamia. They date back to the Ubaid period around the year 5500 BC, making the statues at least 7,000 years old. Mainstream archaeologists say that the statues were carved by the ancient Sumerians, commonly believed to be the first major civilization on the planet. The figurines are carved almost to look like humans, except for the outrageous fact that they are certainly reptilian in nature, with obvious reptile eyes and heads like lizards. The theory here is that the Sumerians came into direct contact with reptilian creatures and they made their figurines in their likeness. Some claim the reptilian overlords revealed themselves to the ancient people of the world and helped them to push society forward before retreating into the shadows. Nobody knows where these reptilians may have come from, though the main assumption is that they came from space. Number 9. Mayan Astronaut King. Researchers in Mexico finally decoded the name written in hieroglyphics on a tomb in the ancient city of Palenque. The tomb belonged to the ancient Mayan ruler King Pakal. The inscription that was finally decoded on the tomb reads, "The House of the Nine Sharpened Spears." This was a pretty astounding revelation since the crypt was originally discovered over 60 years ago in 1948. But it's not the inscription or the hieroglyphics that really have investigators in a frenzy trying to find more clues. It's King Pakal himself, who some say was an ancient astronaut. The king was born in the year 603. He ascended the age of only 12 and led one of the most prosperous governments the ancient city of Palenque had ever seen. He was also responsible for some of the finest architecture that still remains in the ruins of the Maya city today. When the king was discovered in his tomb, the archaeologists were shocked to see that the lid to his sarcophagus depicted a man reclining in a spaceship as if about to take off to the moon. This led to all kinds of outrageous theories, with the main one being that somehow King Pakal was an astronaut. There doesn't appear to be any obvious way that the old Mayan king could have traveled to space. In fact, mainstream science would say that the idea is completely insane. The only thing that would make any sense is if he'd been visited by extraterrestrials who put him inside their spaceship and then brought him back later. It could be that King Pakal had his experience with extraterrestrials memorialized on the lid of his sarcophagus. But again, this is just a theory. Number 8. The Sanxingdui aliens. Strange figurines found at the Chinese archaeological site of Sanxingdui have sparked more wild theories about aliens. Oddly enough, the figurines found here very closely resemble the reptilian figurines found at Ubaid. They have thin eyes like lizards, though their bodies are a little bit more human. Still, they have ridiculously large ears, weird faces, and everything about them screams extraterrestrial. It could be that the ancient society living in Sanxingdui 3,000 years ago met the same race of reptilian overlords as the Sumerians 4,000 years earlier, then recreated them using sculptures. Naturally, all mainstream scientists have denied the claim, but it wouldn't be forbidden history if everyone agreed on the more shocking theory. The Sanxingdui ruins themselves were discovered back in 1929 and date to the Bronze Age. Nobody knows exactly who these people were, as there have been no historical records of them found anywhere else in China. Even though they boasted wildly advanced technology, were able to create impressive pieces of architecture and design clothes, they are ghosts in the historical record. It could be that the people of Sanxingdui didn't need any contact with the outside world after coming face to face with aliens. Number 7. Alien skulls. Elongated humanoid skulls that may have belonged to aliens or even human/alien hybrids have been discovered in a cemetery in Mexico. According to the Scientific American, these skulls date back 1,000 years and were deliberately wrapped in cloth to distort their shape. At least this is the official narrative. Researchers say that the skulls belong to ordinary humans who practice skull deformation, which involved compressing the skulls of children so that as they grew, their skulls became elongated and they looked like aliens. These kinds of skulls have been found everywhere across the globe, from Mexico to Peru, and even throughout places in Europe. This has led to some serious speculation over whether the people were really people at all, and not aliens. After all, it seems insane that Europeans and Mesoamericans would have come up with the same weird idea to compress the skulls of their children. Why would two groups of people who have never met each other do such a thing if not inspired by visitors from outer space with deformed heads? Or even spookier is the idea that these were in fact people, but that they were born from a union between a human woman and an alien man, hence the cranial deformities. Number 6. Renaissance UFOs. A painting from the 15th century very obviously shows aliens visiting Earth hundreds of years ago, and nobody wants to talk about it. The painting is called Madonna and the Child, and it depicts John the Baptist as an infant in the presence of the Madonna. Currently, the painting is hanging on the wall at the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence. Nobody knows exactly who made the painting, though it has been credited to either Jacopo del Celaio or Sebastiano Mainardi. But it's not John the Baptist or the portrayal of the Madonna that have captured people's attention. It's the UFO clearly hovering in the sky in the background. Over the Madonna's shoulder, there is a black orb hovering in the sky. Below the orb is a man with his hand to his brow, as if gazing at it. He even has a dog beside him, also staring at the UFO. This is bizarre because they didn't have flying objects back in the 1500s. They had no airplanes, and they certainly didn't have spacecraft. This painting is either proof that people have been witnessing UFOs for hundreds of years, or that during the Renaissance, it was public knowledge that aliens existed. Perhaps the artist was using his imagination, or perhaps he had seen something mysterious and decided to add it to his work. We'll likely never know the full story. Number 5. Nazi aliens. Nearing the end of World War II, Hitler was desperate to develop a superior technology that could win him the war. Luckily, the US developed the atomic bomb first. Still, there are a lot of rumors floating around about special weapons the Germans were working on. One of these weapons is called Die Glocke. As rumor has it, the Nazis managed to get a hold of some alien technology and were trying to create an anti-gravity weapon that would devastate their enemies. It was obviously never developed or used, but the rumors are there. Some even say that after the war was over, the SS Colonel Hans Kammler traded the Die Glocke technology to the Americans in return for his freedom. This theory is purported by the fact that in December of 1965, a UFO was seen crashing outside Kecksburg in Pennsylvania. The UFO was allegedly the result of Die Glocke alien technology being experimented with by US scientists. Unfortunately, seeing as we don't have any anti-gravity machines 70 years after the war, there probably isn't much stock in this rumor. It's still interesting to think about what would have happened if the German military really did get a hold of alien technology. They could have won the war if they had a bit more time to study it. Do you think any military could stand up to powerful alien technology? Or would we be all toast if extraterrestrials did show up on their spacecraft? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more wild videos. Number 4. The Extraterrestrial Pharaoh. The pharaoh Akhenaten ruled Egypt between the years 1351 and 1334 BC. He was the 10th ruler of the 18th dynasty and may have been an alien. This is a forbidden part of Egyptian history, as most historians tend to dismiss any notion that Akhenaten was anything but an odd-looking man. One of the strangest things the pharaoh did was force his fellow Egyptians to renounce all their gods. Up until his rule, the Egyptians worshipped a pantheon of different gods, including the sun god Ra. After he took power, he ordered that only the god Aten was to be worshipped, greatly angering the general population. He started the cult of Aten and built temples in this new god's honor. Even stranger is that Akhenaten looked, judging on the depictions of him carved on ancient walls and his larger-than-life statues, not quite like a woman and not quite like a man. He seemed to be a hybrid human, and he even had an unusually elongated skull, like some of the alleged alien skulls unearthed in Mexico and Peru. Akhenaten has been called the alien king of Egypt for this very reason, as many believe he was either wholly alien or at least part alien. Number 3. Martian fossils. 25 years ago, scientists with NASA made a shocking announcement, claiming they had spotted potential alien life from Mars in a meteorite. It happened in 1996 when David McKay and his team of researchers thought they found microbial fossils inside a meteorite called Allen Hills 84001. The meteorite ended up on our planet after a cosmic impact on Mars, something so powerful that rocks were literally blasted off the planet to land on Earth. It was discovered in Antarctica by geologists riding snowmobiles, a total freak discovery that shocked the scientific community. The meteorite was from a piece of rock that formed 4 billion years ago and landed on Earth 13,000 years ago. Crystals discovered inside the meteorite appeared to be fossilized life forms, which would be direct evidence of alien life, regardless of the size. But here's where things get fishy. After the announcement in 1996, scientists zipped their lips and stopped talking about it immediately. The discovery was cast aside and hasn't been properly investigated ever since. It was almost as if the physical evidence of life in the universe was a forbidden topic in mainstream science. The legacy of the meteorite still lives on today, but there's now so much controversy surrounding the discovery that it's doubtful anyone will ever believe the crystals found in the rock are actually fossilized aliens. Number 2. Police investigation. There was once a UFO sighting so believable that it was investigated by the police. A man named Robert Taylor told the police that he had witnessed an alien spaceship in the forest near Livingston back in 1979. At the time, Taylor was 61 years old. He described witnessing a mysterious object around 30 feet above him with a huge dome-shaped ceiling. It hovered above the forest and released 2 spiky spheres of light that began floating down towards Taylor. Before they reached him, he passed out. He woke up about 20 minutes later, completely disheveled, with his pants ripped and the police believing he had been the victim of a violent assault. Sadly, Taylor passed away in 2007. But his story did not die with him. Taylor had been a respected war hero and a devoted churchgoer, such a respectable man in his community that nobody even doubted his sighting. The first person he told was his wife, who was so worried by his dazed condition that she phoned the police, who then went to investigate the clearing. Oddly enough, by the time the local constable arrived at the clearing where the UFO was witnessed, there was already a mass gathering of police officers. This was bizarre because in the small town, there wasn't exactly a huge police force waiting to investigate random UFO sightings. The local officer discovered strange markings on the ground that appeared to have been left over by some kind of strange piece of machinery. The markings had no origin and didn't seem to go anywhere. They were just there, in a small grouping in the clearing and nowhere else. In the end, the case was shut down and no definitive answers were ever given. Number 1. Ancient Astronaut. The Catedral Nueva in Spain was built starting in the year 1513. It took a few centuries to finish as the construction was interrupted by a string of catastrophic events, including a devastating earthquake in 1755. But the reason the cathedral is so interesting today is that among the leaves and foliage carved into the stonework of the portico at the entrance, there is a carving of an astronaut. It's extremely out of place for something built almost 600 years before today. After all, the first astronauts weren't around until the 20th century, or so we think. So why in the world was an astronaut carved into a cathedral that was built in the 16th century? Unfortunately, the spaceman came years after the cathedral was originally built. The stoneworkers didn't prophesize a spaceman from the future. It was incorporated into the building when the carvings around the door needed to be replaced. The builders carved the spaceman in honor of one of the most important historical things that happened since the church was installed. Still, for visitors, the spaceman is quite shocking if you don't know the full story behind it. What's your interpretation of this type of forbidden history? Number 10. Mysterious Egyptian Chambers. A team of archaeologists recently discovered one of the strangest sights anywhere in Egypt. The team was out in the desert, just west of Abydos, when they realized there were small openings scattered along the highest side of a cliff. These openings, from a distance, looked like square post holes. They instead turned out to be entrances, which led to mysterious chambers carved into the rocky cliff. These chambers are significantly larger than the archaeologists had expected, with some of them having up to 5 rooms connected by passages cut into the rock. The mysterious chambers were found just south of the ancient royal cemetery of el-Ka'ab. They contain no decoration and no clues as to what they were used for. Archaeologists found scraps of ceramics, the fragments of benches, and small nooks in the walls where candles may have been placed. Matthew Adams with the New York University Institute of Fine Arts said that after a careful inspection, it was determined these chambers were not used as cemeteries. There was no evidence that any bodies were buried or even entombed here. Instead, the chambers probably held some great religious significance, because they were carved into the cliff so high off the ground, so difficult to get to. They may have been used in extremely secret ceremonies. The issue is that whoever performed these ceremonies left no evidence to their activities behind. As for how old the cliff chambers are, they've been dated back to between 323 and 30 BC. Number 9. Qumran. Qumran is probably most famous as being the place where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. The archaeological zone of Qumran is located in the desert of Israel, right in the middle between Jerusalem and the Dead Sea. Remains here have been found dating all the way back from the Iron Age. Qumran itself was established as a settlement in the Hellenistic period sometime around 200 BC. It remained inhabited until 68 BC when the Romans showed up. Archaeologists have uncovered structures, pottery kilns, many different houses, and even an aqueduct system that had been used to bring fresh water to the desert city from the fertile regions in the north. The city was occupied by a Jewish sect called the Essenes, who wanted to separate themselves from the big city and live in a commune situation. They spent all of their time studying sacred scriptures, performing mysterious religious rituals, and practicing celibacy. But this wasn't a very big settlement. Only about 200 people lived here, and they're the ones who created the Dead Sea Scrolls. The scrolls were written just before the failed Jewish revolt in which the Jewish people tried to gain independence from Rome. The rebellion lasted from between 66 to 70 AD, with many of the Jews of the time being forced to seek shelter in Qumran from the rampaging Romans who didn't really appreciate being rebelled against. Just before the Romans showed up to Qumran and destroyed their settlement, the Essenes stashed over 200 sacred texts inside of jars and then hid them in various caves, where they weren't discovered again until 1947, totally by accident, by a couple of sheep herders. Number 8. Fortress of Solitude. Some people refer to the most mysterious archaeological site in Russia as the Fortress of Solitude. In reality, this bizarre fortress is called Porbazhin, and it's a bizarre ruin from the medieval days that sits just 20 miles from the border of Mongolia. The ruin is on a small island which itself sits in the middle of a very remote lake, high in the Siberian mountains. The walls of the medieval ruin still rise 40 feet above the ground. The area within the walls is about 7 acres, with the remains of over 30 buildings creating a bizarre stone labyrinth unlike anything else on Earth. Porbazhin is believed to have been built by the local Uyghur people, who were Turkic-speaking nomads that once ruled a massive empire that comprised much of Mongolia and a huge piece of Siberia. The descendants of the Uyghur people are now mostly restricted to living in Western China, though they were once a serious force to be reckoned with in the Far East. The fortress was most recently excavated by Irina Arshantseva from the Russian Academy of Sciences. She and her team have uncovered all kinds of amazing artifacts dated back to the middle of the 8th century. This was right at the end of the Uyghur Empire's power as they began to decline in the year 848. But unfortunately, nobody can say yet what the immense fortress island was used for. It may not have had anything to do with the military, instead acting as a type of religious sanctuary. Number 7. The Cave of Cybele. The Cave of Cybele was discovered in modern times back in 1932 by an Italian archaeologist named Amedeo Maiuri. The cave was probably constructed sometime around the 5th century BC, during a time when Rome was heavily influenced by the Greeks. Within the cave is a passageway cut from rock that goes on for almost 400 feet. It runs parallel to the cliff face outside, with bizarre walls shaped like trapezoids. At the very end of the corridor is a room with a vestibule and 3 small cells. According to legend, this was the place where the prophet Cybele would give her predictions. In Roman lore, Cybele was a priestess who acted as an oracle. She toiled deep in the earth below Rome's Temple of Apollo. She would write her predictions on leaves and then display them at the entrance of the cave. Up until the discovery of her sanctuary, she was mostly thought to be a myth. Archaeologists are now certain that this person really did exist, although how powerful her predictions were and how important she was to the Romans at the time is still a mystery. Number 6. Ancient stone structures. Archaeologists from the University of Western Australia and Perth believe they have just identified some of the oldest stone structures anywhere in the world. These structures were found in northwestern Saudi Arabia and were probably built during the 6th millennium BC for ritual purposes. Archaeologists identified 350 stone structures from the air by using a helicopter, with another 641 being found thanks to satellite images and remote sensing technology. In total, they uncovered at least 1,000 of these bizarre pieces of ancient technology. They vary in size, shape, and general appearance. Some appear to be stone cubicles, others are standing stones, and all were built during the Neolithic period. Archaeologists say the structures were probably used as ancient animal pens that the people would utilize to sacrifice wild and domestic animals to the unknown deities they once worshipped. This is according to Hugh Thomas, one of the archaeologists involved in the study. He says the structures are now the earliest evidence of Neolithic religious activity happening in the Arabian desert. The big mystery is trying to figure out why these structures were built. They are significant in size, suggesting large communities or big groups of people needed to work together to build them. This suggests social organization as well as a common belief system. But considering this happened roughly 8,000 years ago, it's impossible to say what had motivated these people to build over 1,000 megalithic stone structures just for the purpose of sacrificing animals. Number 5. Ancient stone circle. Archaeologists have made an amazing breakthrough in discovering a mysterious stone circle that is even older than the Stonehenge. This was discovered in Turkey, with the experts saying the Neolithic archaeological site not only predates the Stonehenge, it predates everything ever built as the first temple in the world. The structure is made up of a series of stone circles that were probably built in the year 9000 BC. This is based on radiocarbon dating of organic material taken from the stonework. That means 11,000 years before today, a mysterious group of ancient people built the first megalithic structure in the history of the planet. This happened 6,000 years before anyone even got the idea to build the Stonehenge. The archaeological site is called Göbekli Tepe. Jens Nottroff from the German Archaeological Institute said that we today are closer to the ancient people who built the Stonehenge than they were to the people who built Göbekli Tepe. What else is truly amazing is that the people here built the stone circles without any proper tools. Metal hadn't been discovered yet, there was no such thing as a wheel, and yet they managed to bash stone together to create something truly impressive. Who built it and why is still being debated by scientists. What do you think about all these mysterious ancient circles? Why do you think we humans love them so much? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more amazing videos. Number 4. Lost Monastery. The old seat of power for one of the most influential women in English history was just discovered in a small village in Berkshire. The discovery came in the form of a lost monastery where Queen Sinethryth once ruled. The ruins of the monastery were found by a research team from the University of Reading. They uncovered pieces of timber left over from the buildings in which the monks and nuns had lived, as well as pieces of jewelry, cooking items, and personal effects. If you're wondering who Queen Sinethryth is, she was the wife of King Offa. Together, they ruled one of the oldest kingdoms in English history, the Kingdom of Mercia. This was roughly 40 years before the Vikings arrived in 793. The rulers of Mercia were hell-bent on distributing Christian values throughout the land. The queen is fascinating for a number of reasons, not least of which is that she was one of the first English female leaders who had a genuine status among the people and wielded a significant amount of influence. Archaeologists have found letters exchanged between King Offa and Charlemagne in France, and Charlemagne always addressed the letters he sent to England to Offa and Sinethryth, both by name. The newly discovered monastery was where the queen ruled over Mercia after her husband's death until she died in the year 796. It was found along the river Thames, at the exact place where the border between Mercia and the Kingdom of Wessex once was. Number 3. Viking Drinking Hall. Archaeologists in Scotland have uncovered what they believe to be a Viking drinking hall. The ruins were found during excavations on a farmstead in Orkney. Researchers dug up stone walls, pieces of pottery, and even an old Norse bone comb. Everything they found has been dated back to the 10th century, with the experts saying the drinking hall may have been used by the famous Viking chieftain Sigurd. To make things a little clearer, Orkney in Scotland was once a great seat of power for the Norse Empire. Even today, many small towns in the region still have Norse names. The land was only given back to the Scottish crown in the year 1468, when Christian I of Denmark volunteered to give it up. The people in the area have been closely linked to the Scandinavians who arrived in what is today the United Kingdom back in the 8th century. This newly discovered drinking hall is just one piece of what was once a huge Viking settlement. 1,000 years ago, the Viking conquerors sat in this hall and shared flagons of ale. Number 2. Monte Testaccio. Monte Testaccio is an ancient Roman garbage dump. There's no easy way to put it, but for 250 years, Romans smashed their used terracotta jars and dumped them on this specific hill. It became known to the Romans as Monte dei Cocci, which translates roughly to the Mountain of Shards. It's located today next to the Tiber River port, an area that had likely been used for storing imported goods, things like olive oil. Excavations from the 1990s revealed to archaeologists that the hill had been created intentionally as an organized garbage heap. The jars found here date back to between the years 140 and 250, though some layers of the trash underneath may be even older. The jars also didn't come from Rome, but were instead imported from Spain, Tunisia, and even Libya. Archaeologists have estimated that there are at least 80 million pots smashed on the hill. It stands 115 feet tall, with another 45 feet of trash buried beneath the street level. The hill was in use until around the year 500, when Rome was effectively destroyed. The hill became a location for pagan rituals and festivals, for feasts, and even for reenactments of the crucifixion of Jesus. It wasn't until the 1930s that an architect realized how important Monte Testaccio was and had the whole place turned into a protected public park. In modern times, a low budget has left the hill abandoned yet again. Number 1. Gateway to Hell. The Eleusis Plutonian is an ancient sanctuary that was once believed to be the gateway into hell. In reality, this place was used for the mysterious cult ritual known as the Eleusinian Mysteries. Today, the Plutonian is just an old cave in Athens with some crumbled stone lying out front, but back in the 6th century BC, the cave was thought to be used as a portal into the underworld. Those who followed the Eleusinian Mysteries were part of the cult of Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, and they believed the story in which Demeter's daughter, Persephone, was kidnapped by Hades and taken into the underworld. Persephone basically became the queen of hell, but her mother was extremely unhappy about her daughter being in the underworld. So Hades agreed to let Persephone out to be with her mother for 6 months out of the year. And this, of course, ended up representing the agricultural cycle. Demeter would not allow anything to grow while her daughter was in the underworld, representing fall and winter. In any case, the connection between the underworld, agriculture, and the seasons is all quite closely intertwined. It was in this cave where the mysterious Eleusinian Mysteries would be carried out. Archaeologists and historians don't know what exactly these rituals look like, but they had something to do with regeneration, rebirth, and the coming of spring. Unfortunately, the sanctuary here was closed in 392 AD when the Romans outlawed what they considered to be pagan activities. The Romans then destroyed many of the places important to the Eleusinian Mysteries. Would you dare walk into the gateway of hell? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and check back soon for more amazing videos.